Chapter 16. PSS. Kana versus the Myrmidon. They were facing each other on the stage, waiting for the signal. In the previous round, Aaliyah fought against the Myrmidon and just barely came out on top after he used his innate ability. Their punches are especially vicious as they were essential 2 arms in one. It amplified the strength of their blows. The reason Broly won so easily was mostly because of his speed vastly outstripping his opponents. Without any chance to retaliate, ZYRD got completely dominated. Of course, even if a hit landed, it would be unclear if it could do heavy damage to Broly, as his body seemed to be especially tough, making him essentially a humanoid tank. Aaliyah and Kana are obviously different. They would be in great trouble if a hit landed directly on their body. Aaliyah was able to win against her opponent because she surpassed him in raw power. Kana, on the other side, only surpassed him in their base strength. As soon as her opponent started to transform, her loss would be practically set. So, it was natural that she tried to end this fight as soon as possible. She silently directed her ki into her hands as they waited for the signal. Fight! She put both her hands together, pointing towards her opponent, and pushed all the ki she could muster out of her hands. H-shay! A blue energy wave blasted through the air, ripping open the ground beneath it as it flew towards her opponent. Before the attack connected, he jumped up, additionally using ki waves towards the ground to escape the attack by a hair's breadth. Doing a flip, he landed back on the stage. As he mockingly looked at Kana, her face went pale as she saw that. She used a mere amount of her ki for this attack. Are you dumb? It was clear that you wanted to end this before I transform. Of course, I would be wary of any sudden attacks at the start of the round. Well, now it's too late. Ha ha ha. The Myrmidon started to transform as he was laughing. Without waiting for him to finish, Kana let out several ki blasts. Wanting to interrupt the transformation at any cost, she blasted the area where he stood. Explosion after explosion sounded out as the smoke cloud increased, and the shrapnel flew through the air. The Myrmidon now nowhere to be seen. Ha, ha, ha. That probably didn't do much, did it? Since the referee or the city lord didn't intervene, it was clear that her opponent didn't die even though no ki could be felt. Suddenly, the smoke was blasted away as a figure in the middle appeared, shining in a red hue. Now it's my turn. He dashed towards Kana up front. As she intercepted his punch, he faded away like a mirage. A moment later, Kana found her view starting to rapidly spin. Her shoulder felt as if it was crushed. She tried to stop herself by readjusting herself in the air, but her high momentum made any attempts futile. Just as she was to fly out of the ring, she stopped. She was being held by her arm, just a few tens of cm in front of the boundary. We are not done with playing. I saw your fellow Saiyan trash my older brother. Since that's the case, it seems like your race owns us a debt, and you start with repaying. After he said that, he pushed her face into the ground. He outstretched her arm, raised his leg, and stomped down. Kana knew what he wanted to do. If he snapped her arm this way, she would not only lose, but she might even be crippled. She couldn't lose here. Why did she train so hard? Only to be stopped here? Her life flashed across her life. She was born in a low-class warrior family, and with her mid-level strength, she was the pride of her parents and her siblings. She could remember her family always being around her. For 5 years her life was perfect, until Frieza doomed the whole planet. She and her parents were swept inside a rift, giving them a chance to survive the explosion. However, in the strange cloud space, danger was ever present. Her parents protected her from harm, even if it meant to be injured. They protected her. It was because of them she was barely able to survive and made it to this planet. After their arrival, her father succumbed to his wounds he sustained by protecting her. Spending a few days in the forest fighting off the local wildlife, her mother was mauled from a pack of wolves, only seconds before she was saved. She became stronger by feeding her hatred for Frieza, her siblings who died in the explosion, her parents who protected her till the end. She swore to herself that she will rip apart Frieza with her own hands. For that she had to be the strongest she could be. As if she could lose here. Pure anger filled her mind. I will kill Frieza even if it means my end. As if I would lose to the likes of you. I will crush you, Myrmidon. Her last thoughts before her mind went blank. The stomp connected, but the arm didn't break like expected. Giving out growls, she slowly stood up. Her black hair rising into the air, her body bulking up a little. A golden aura started to blaze around her body. The Myrmidon, without being able to hold her down, took a few steps back. Fear evident in his eyes as they met her white eyes. Eyes without irises aiming at him, like an enraged beast. H-shay. Kana stood up, turned to her opponent, and dashed towards him. He sent a few ki blasts trying to stop her, but it couldn't even stall her for a second. Her fist crashed into his face, sending him flying dozens of meters, sliding across the floor before he hit something. With a bloody broken nose, he turned around, and only saw a barrage of fists, pummeling him into the ground of the stage, extending the crater, forming around his body with each hit. For a few seconds, only screams and racking of bones could be heard. He became a bloody mess, before his coach could throw in the towel. Broly saw the whole fight, witnessing the awe-inspiring aura which Kana suddenly produced. His eyes widened as he came to a realization while he saw her transformation. This is the Pseudo-Super Saiyan. Chapter 17. Draco. When a Saiyan tries to transform but hasn't enough S cells to truly turn Super Saiyan, the Saiyan briefly goes into a false Super Saiyan state known as Pseudo-Super Saiyan. The only reason Kana didn't achieve Super Saiyan was only because she wasn't strong enough. Luckily, she didn't outright kill him. Fortunately, it is a state one can only sustain for a few moments. Broly went over to the now resting Kana to check up on her. This form heavily burdens the body even more than the normal Super Saiyan, as what is achieved is essentially an incomplete form. She was completely exhausted after the fight, but luckily it was her last fight, so she had enough time to rest. Kana, how do you feel? I'm fine, I think. I don't remember much. I only wanted to win. I was so angry that I was about to lose everything I've worked for. My mind just blanked for a second before I was congratulated by Daz. I asked him about what happened, but was as clueless as me. A shame. It seems it is quite the strong power. If I could make it my own, Sai.
Pseudo Super Saiyan.
The state you were in is called the Pseudo-Super Saiyan. It is not so important that you remember what happened during your blackout, but you should recall everything before you transformed. It will help you transform into a Super Saiyan in the future. Broly left her with these words. His last battle was awaiting him. Kana was in daze before her eyes widened in shock, looking at the back of Broly. Now Kana, Aaliyah and Taro moved to the next round. Only Broly and Ace were left with one fight. Coincidentally, both their opponents were Dracos. Broly could make out by the aura the opponent of Ace gave off in its battles that Ace will have a hard time against him. Ace was a bit weaker than his opponent, but if he stayed at a distance and shoot ki blasted him, he should be fine. The Dracos weren't bad at ki attacks, since the attacks of the CE forced them to use it more often. But the innate strength of those humanoid dragons were still their slashes, slicing their opponent up with their claws or breathing fire. On close and middle-ranged battles, they were standing on the apex. Broly knew this, so like a smart man he chose to only fight him in close combat. He needed the battle experience. Even though he sparred with Aaliyah, Taro, and Daz almost every day in the last 2 months, it is not the same as they were still Saiyans. Now an opponent presented itself with unique and different methods for battle. How could he not be excited? His weakness were still his techniques, which left him behind most. He used his superior body strength, his ki, and his keen fighting instincts to bridge this gap and far surpassing them, but he knew how important close combat techniques were. An opponent which is adept in close combat, Broly only needed to suppress his ki, and a perfect sharpening tool presented itself. After every battle he would analyze his moves and always discovered new flaws and tried to fix them. He was constantly reducing useless movements, becoming sharper as he battles. Even in his previous battles, which utterly bored him, not even making him move, showed him new attack methods. Like the succubi. Although it had no effect on him, he learned that by releasing a bit of ki with his speech he could influence his opponent. Although it would only be helpful in making his opponent disorientated for a second, it still added something to his repertoire. Fight! Without hesitation, Broly closed in. Ducking under his opponent's slash, he slammed his fist into his opponent. Sliding across the stage, the Draco took a deep breath. Broly followed his movements only to see a yellow wall appearing in front the Draco, approaching him. Fire breath. Ha! A green sphere surrounded Broly at the last second, before the flames engulfed him, pushing him backwards as the ground under him gave in, the tiles crackling from the high temperature, only slowly extinguishing after the breath stopped. The former white tiles were now charred black with a now black energy sphere resting on top, before shattering and revealing a figure in a white GI, putting out a small flame on his shoulder before once again dashing towards the Draco. This time, however, he caught his slash, pulling him hard towards him, letting him fall, just to meet his face with his knee. Just as he connected, a shadow formed above Broly, slamming him away, flying a few meters before readjusting himself in the air. The Dracos had tails and apparently used them as weapon as well, Broly thought as he sensed the blood trickling over his cheek. Don't think I will go easy on the likes of you, growled the Draco as he for the first time took the initiative, appearing in front of Broly wildly slashing at him. Broly barely dodging the claws, he waited for an opportunity. With every second he got pushed closer to the stage end. The Draco, not giving Broly any time to breath, pushed even harder, until he got swiftly hit in the face. It was not a strong hit, but he lost his focus for a fraction of a second, enough time for Broly to exploit. A punch followed towards the side of the Draco, a clean hit on the right side of his body, flying dozens of meters, before trying to stand up again just to immediately fell to his knees. He had a hard time breathing. His arms and legs felt like jelly. He just kneeled there trying to take a breath without success. A liver punch? Although you guys look way different than us, it seems our inner structure is rather similar. Broly smiling at his lucky punch. But did you really forget that I too have a tail? Well, a win is a win, I guess. It is not like it isn't a part of my body. Without saying anything further, he closed in before kicking him outside the stage. Earning the first place in his group, he went to have a look at A's result. He seemed to have struggled a bit against the fire breath as most of the stage got turned black, but he finished his opponent off with a few blasts. Narrator: the group of 5 won their battles and are ready to move to the next round. Only another fight left before they gain the right as disciples. Will they succeed? Or will they be stopped at the finishing line? Find out next on Broly the Saiyan of Legend. Chapter 18. Next round. What the hell? I always heard that Saiyans had a big appetite, but to actually see it is something else. What do they have as stomach? A black hole. The other contestant had similar thoughts as they saw them ate in the break. The stage was being connected back together for the next round. 20 contestants left. For the next round, usually from a different race, were bet against each other, since most want as many from their race to become a disciple as possible. So, the races were excited to hear that the races would be spread out as wide as possible. Certainly, a good move to appease the races. The Saiyans were especially delighted as all their younglings had a chance to become a disciple. As a surprise for all the races, they were among the strongest contestants. Considering it was their most talented bunch, far surpassing the older generation, being tempered by 10 times gravity from birth on, their average power rose sharply. The show Kana delivered made them apprehensive as well, wondering if the other Saiyans could do the same. If all could increase their power times 30, as Kana did, there would be no doubt who will win in this tournament. In the end, 5 Saiyans, 4 trolls, 3 Dracos, 2 Myrmidons, 1 Wolfman, 1 Harpy, 1 Succubus, 2 who looked like they come from the City Lord's race, and an octopus-like humanoid with an orange and a blue skin complexion, which calls themselves a Pule. After an hour break, the next round was announced as well as the upcoming fights. The first fight was Taro versus the Succubus. Unsurprisingly, her attacks had almost no effects against Taro. He was someone very determined. He was barely threatened by something which tested the sturdiness of his mind. The next fight was a Harpy against a Troll. The Harpy completely mauled the Troll with her feathers. Although the feathers gave off a soft look, when she flicks them off her wing with a swipe, they essentially become flying daggers. With their adept flying skills, the Troll just couldn't reach her despite being able to take in several hits, and with their fast regeneration. Following that, the Wolfman surprised Broly as he was a lot stronger than the Wolf King. He killed. After all, this Wolfman was still a child. His fast speed was something everyone couldn't underestimate. He ended his fight against the Myrmidon in a few seconds. He was without a doubt the fastest in the tournament. The fourth battle was between A's and another Troll. In the group stage, he already lost against a different Troll, and now he had to win no matter the cost. Here he couldn't afford to lose once. The resilience of the Trolls was already known by him. Instead on fighting head-on against him, he backed away. He went close to the edge waiting for the Troll to gain momentum and close into 2 meters. He shot a key blast right into the face of the Troll just before he could grab him, quickly jumping to the side, letting the Troll to run off the stage. A rather easy way to fool the Troll to run off the stage, though one could not underestimate the timing and nerves to do so with strong opponents. Of course, other races would have already noticed the trap or avoided the blast to the face. Trolls were used to tanking hits and to build up momentum, bringing about its ruin. The following round was between Aaliyah and the Apule. Apules were more active in the universe, being often seen in the Frost Demon's armies. They usually used cannons to fight, but this one was obviously a strong deviation of the norm. A balanced fighter with no particular strengths or weaknesses, but also with no obvious flaws. With a battle power of around the upper hundreds of thousands, he gave Aaliyah a decent fight, but Saiyans were in general tougher than Apules. Additionally, she was not a normal Saiyan. It was the former number 1 prodigy. She lowered her strength to match that of his opponent and dragged out the fight to enjoy it more. She fought him for whole 9 minutes, since the time limit was increased from 1 minute. To end it off, she kicked him frontal to the chest, and even though he blocked it, he just slid off the stage without stopping until he crashed into the wall under the audience. As the 6th round, a Draco and a Myrmidon fought it out on stage. Through the claws of the Draco and the strength of the Myrmidon, the stage got bloody quickly. The cracking of scales and bones could be heard with every hit from the Myrmidon, but he himself wasn't in a better shape. Dracos were renowned for their close combat after all. With numerous slash wounds, the stage was painted with blood, which shortly after would be burned away by the fire breath, charring it black. He could have won more easily if he used his transformation, but it appeared he didn't think it would be necessary, sustaining wounds as a result. In the end, the Myrmidon, as a surprise for all, charged through the fire before throwing a punch straight at the chest. With a loud crack of bones shattering, the Draco was sent flying out of the ring, essentially winning at the cost for being slightly burned all over his body. As he walked off the stage, he stood in front of Broly, who was waiting for his battle, and said aloud, "I will take revenge for Zyrd, my younger brother. When you see my transformation, you will tremble in fear." Don't think because you defeated one of us, you will against us all. Has he a different transformation? No way. Got something to say, Saiyan? It is too late to apology dash. I already heard it from the opponent of Kana, but he was Zerd's brother as well. Is this like a family gathering for you? Are you all masochists, or something? You will see what will happen to your big mouth, after I'm done with you. I will crush you. Yeah. Zerd said the same thing. It's ZYRD. Yeah, whatever. Next fight Broly from the Saiyans versus Temindon from the Trolls. Ignoring the fuming Myrmidon, he walked onto the stage. Chapter 19, Noid. Fight. Trolls are slow accelerators. They pick up speed slowly, but the gained momentum is overwhelming, considering their heavy bodies, innate strength, and beast-like approaches in battle. Most of the species on this planet have more powerful bodies in comparison of the rest of the universe, but trolls especially. Their strength for earth-shattering punches and forcefully tearing their opponent apart made the other species reluctant to go in direct confrontation with them. With their brute force mentality, most were anxious dealing with them, as one couldn't be sure that they won't attack you. But if one was brave enough to deal with them, they could make quite an earning, as they were rather dumb. The only reason they could live with the other races in this city was because they were targeted by the CE for their powerful life force. Their regeneration, a characteristic for trolls, was making them a target for those unknown creatures. Only after heavy losses, decided their wise leader to accept the invitation from an alliance. Although they were still dreaded and despised in society for their unreasonably and beastly behavior, no one could help but feel pity for Temindon as he faced off Broly on the stage. His slow charges and attacks were easy to dodge. Temindon couldn't catch up with Broly if he backed away. Neither could he wound his opponent, as he was too slippery. Not even a hair could be touched by him. A frustrating event for the young troll, making him even more enraged, the smile on his opponent's face, as if to mock him for his efforts. Of course, Broly wasn't just messing around with Temindon. Temindon was taking in hits after every failed grab or punch he gave, his high regeneration constantly restoring his body. His cuts were closing at a visibly rate. Broken bones were slowly connecting back together midst battle, bruises fading away as he kept charging. Even with the high life force of a troll, after nearly 10 minutes of being constantly wounded, from small cuts to life-threatening wounds, he collapsed on the stage, finally ending this brutal fight. A one-sided slaughter, a beast playing with his prey. This time the beast wasn't the troll. Broly made his opponent in the true sense of the word, a walking punching bag. After finishing his fight, Broly went off the stage with a satisfied expression on his face. Daz with a rather solemn face approached him after seeing him finish the battle. You seem satisfied. Yes, of course. It was really nice to fight against a troll. I could test all kind of attacks to see the effect it had on the troll. It really showed what was effective and what wasn't. And since it was a troll, he wouldn't die if I were a bit rougher. Ha ha ha. A bit rougher? You broke almost every one of his bones. You exaggerate. If it really was that bad, he would have given up. With these words, he left Daz standing dazed. Maybe he is right. Besides, we don't have the time to be soft. If he can get stronger, he should make full use of every method he can get his hands on. Sometimes I feel he is a true Saiyan more than the other younglings. Even while training, he showed his resilience and ferociousness. Perhaps the rather peaceful time on this planet made us softer. Next fight Noid from the Eros versus Dremo from the Dracos. Broly turned around to look at the stage after he heard the name's race. Bluish skin and eyes, orange hair, and a pointy ear. They really look like them, but I thought they were extinct and the Bojack's crew were the last survivors. As Noid stood on the stage, he glanced at Broly before focusing back on his opponent. Fight! As soon as the signal came, Dremo rushed forwards, trying to close the distance as soon as possible, while Noid just pointed his hands at him. Seemingly undisturbed by the approaching Dremo, Dremo suddenly stopped as he appeared to struggle on the spot, like he was caught in a web. Almost unnoticeable needle-thin threads, made from purple energy, were coming out of Noid's hands. They coiled around the Draco, binding him to a standstill. Dremo felt his strength flowing out of him. Without seeing what it is, he quickly took a deep breath and letting it out. Before his fire breath could reach his opponent, Noid jumped back. His threads were burned down, but even with this the Draco was already on a disadvantage. Not only losing some of his energy, but also his momentum. Now on a defensive, he withstood most of the Ki Blast, but he still had to close in. In a battle between Ki Blast, he wouldn't stand a chance, but in close combat, he was more than confident. He could tell, even though it is a frightening ability, quickly draining his energy, but the user was not that strong himself. He rushed towards Noid while charging up another fire breath. Just as he was about to breath out, his mouth snapped shut, resulting in a suppressed explosion in his mouth. Still under the impact, he didn't realize that his strength was leaving him until he collapsed. Well, this shot down any doubts. They are the same race as Bojack, and so is the City Lord. Why are there still survivors that nobody, even the Kais, know about? The thought extinct Saiyans and Hera race appearing on this planet. Whatever. First priority, getting stronger. Everything else later. Next fight Igdars from the Dracos versus a Trog from the Trolls. Fight. Surprisingly, a Trog didn't move. Rather, he didn't show any of the beast-like mentality. Instead, he was observing his opponent in front of him. The Draco was considering his moves as he knew of the destructiveness of Troll's close combat attacks. Using his innate fire breath seemed a logical move against Troll, as it was not only a strong attack, but the burns hinders a Troll's regeneration, making it an effective weapon against this kind. Just as he breathed in, a Trog dashed towards the Draco, but unlike his fellow companions, he wasn't slow. Faster than normal Trolls, but keeping their fierce momentum. The Draco, certain that the Troll would flee against his natural enemy that is fire, breathed out a wall of flame. But seemingly coping the Myrmidon, he jumped through the fire, hammering the Draco to the ground in the process. He calmly picked him up before throwing him off the stage. Chapter 20. Kana vs. Biko. Now for the last battle of the second round. Kana from the Saiyans versus Biko from the Hera race. This will decide who the last person to reach the top 10 is. After a short break, we will see who will win, Kana or Biko. Broly saw Kana sitting in the resting area, thinking about something. Her legs were slightly shaking, indicating that she was a bit nervous for the next fight. Understandably, as the attack of draining one's energy could quickly result in someone's defeat. If Broly didn't know that they are actually thin threads of energy, a specialty from the Hera race, he wouldn't see through how it works either. One had to know what one should be looking for, otherwise it just looked like they were controlling the opponent with their minds before falling unconscious. Broly walked up to Kana to give her some tips. Hey Kana, want some advice for your next match? Oh, Broly, what are you doing here? Broly furrowed his eyebrows. What are you thinking about? About what you said earlier. If this is really the power to transform into a Super Saiyan, then I can soon have my revenge against Frieza. I will become the strongest. I only have to find out how to unearth this power. But I think it has something to do with my emotions. The strongest? A mere Super Saiyan? This is not the whole extent of our race. Don't think about Super Saiyan now. Focus on the next battle, or you won't be able to become a disciple. Super Saiyan is not the strongest? You only think that way because I'm the one who the legend speaks about and not you. If I can transform, I will be stronger than anyone in the whole universe. And what about being a disciple? It will probably only help me achieve the form quicker and learn some tricks. Besides, what do you know about being a one? If you were one, you would have already shown it to us. Alright, I'm getting pissed. Only because you turned into a pseudo-Super Saiyan, you're getting cocky all of the sudden? Ignorant kid. Saiyans should be prideful, not arrogant. Suit yourself. Clearly getting more frustrated as Kana was babbling on, he just left her on her own devices. Aaliyah approached Broly as she asked, "Are you alright? It seemed you had a fight." Not a fight. She's just being stupid. Break time is over. The last fight starts now. Into position and fight. Kana, without waiting, charged towards Biko. They engaged in a close combat fight, exchanging numerous blows, before Biko backed away, creating distance. Kana, instead of following him, started to shoot ki blasts towards him, quickly filling half of the stage with smoke. A blue energy ball suddenly broke through the smoke, dispersing it as it flew towards Kana. She redirected the ball with a swipe of her hand. After doing so, she dashed towards him, but this time he already has risen his arms, pointing his hands towards her.
A ki blast.
She quickly tried to charge up a ki blast of her own to meet it, but after a few meters she realized that she couldn't move anymore, as if a rope wrapped around her, not letting her go. Caught inside Biko's threads, she rapidly lost her strength. It is over. You're completely caught in my psycho threads. Kana tried to transform like she did earlier, to trigger her power, but what greeted her was nothing. She unsurprisingly fell unconscious. In the previous rounds, Kana was too concentrated on her seemingly newly attained powers that she didn't watch the other fights. Too focused on herself that she was easily caught by the threads. If she had let Broly give her advices, she would have known that the threads are almost unnoticeably, but they move in straight lines before wrapping around her target. Although she turned into a pseudo-Super Saiyan, it is a form that is incredibly rare to achieve, maybe even more so than a regular Super Saiyan. And even achieved once, it is not a transformation accessible by will, even if she recreated the feelings she thought to be the trigger. Her eagerness for the prospect of her way to revenge was her downfall. Now the top 10 is decided. Please all contestants come on the stage. The City Lord has something to say. After they moved onto the stage, they looked towards the host of this tournament. You have fought bravely to become a disciple of mine. In the end, your strength and determination brought you here, succeeding what others couldn't. Now before we move on, are you willing to become my disciples? Yes, sir. With a shout, the contestants answered him. Good. Since this is the case, I will tell you that for the rest of the tournament, there will be credit points. The higher you place, the more credit points you get. There are many techniques I know, and you can exchange them for those credit points. There will be other ways to receive credit points, but this is something for later. Now go and determine the winner of this tournament. All right, before the next round starts, we will have to decide who will fight against each other. Every one of you will take out a random number out of this box. The number will decide who you will be fighting, and when it is your turn. Number 1, for example, will be the first fight, number 2 the second, and so on. Now draw your number. One after one went to the box and drew their number, deciding the next matches. 1. Yanari, the Harpy versus Aliyah, the Saiyan. 2. Noid, the Hera versus Atrog, the Troll. 3. Aze, the Saiyan versus Zinjo, the Myrmidon. 4. Blitz, the Wolfman versus Biko, the Hera. 5. Taro, the Saiyan versus Broly, the Saiyan. Since we are an odd number, we will have another drawing after this round. This way we will determine who will be getting a free win and move to the finals. The finals will be 3 fights between the last 3 contestants. Alright, let's start with the first fight. Yanari versus Aliyah. Chapter 21. The Top 5. Fight. Yanari jumped up, flapping her wings. Feathers shot out like bullets with every flap, but Aliyah just dodged all of them. Aliyah jumped upwards, passing by the gliding harpy before dropping down towards her with a kick. Before the kick landed, Yanari covered herself with her wings. Sent to the ground, it gave in, creating a small crater. Yanari opened her wings to face her opponent again, as she looked up to locate her, but she couldn't find her. I am here. A voice sounded out before her. She looked to the figure, but only saw a fist coming closer. Bang! Too slow to react, she was directly sent flying outside the ring like a cannonball, crashing headfirst into a wall, directly falling unconscious. There was a significant difference in raw strength between the two. Most of the contestants are hovering around a power level of 1,000,000, with only Broly in the second million. Next fight was Noid from the Hera race against Atrog the Troll. A highly anticipated fight, as it was an opportunity to see more from the City Lord's race, but Noid could barely retaliate. Although the Hera race are very powerful, and their psycho threads are dreadful, against Atrog a Troll who mostly rely on their physical strength, their threads, meant for ki absorbing, became meaningless. Atrog could just rip apart the threads with his bare claws, and without this Noid wasn't nearly as strong. Atrog. In close combat, Atrog completely trashed Noid, and even in exchanging ki blasts, Atrog was surprisingly not far worse than Noid, easily ensuring his victory. Aze and Zinjo was barely a fight. Aze, barely approaching 1,000,000, was beaten to a pulp against the Myrmidon, who was almost twice as strong. As a Saiyan, Aze wouldn't back away. After a 10-minute of beatdown, he passed out, declaring Zinjo the winner. Blitz, the Wolfman, like the rounds before, used his sheer speed to overwhelm his opponent. Biko couldn't even use his psycho threads as Blitz was too fast for him to lock onto. Blitz used his speed while running to gather power for his punches and slashes. He never stopped once, leaving Biko completely defenseless for attacks until he couldn't endure his injuries anymore. Over 200 times was he hit in a time span of 1 minute. As all the other injured, he was brought towards the resting area before eating a small capsule made from the fruit of life. It doesn't boost your life force or increases your strength, but it was engineered to be most effective for repairing wounds. The last fight for this round was Taro versus Broly. Taro just stood on stage with a bitter smile, looking at Broly opposite of him, not confident in defeating Broly. In the last 2 months, they often sparred against each other, but even with Aliyah, they weren't enough to trump Broly's raw strength. But this, of course, didn't mean he wouldn't try now. Even with experience of Broly's talent, he still wanted to be strongest, still determined to strive to the top. Even if he lost today, it doesn't mean he won't win tomorrow, Taro thought. Broly, I won't go easy on you. I will go all out. As he fixed his conviction, Taro changed his bitter smile with a determined one. I hope you will, for your own good, that is. Hee. Fight. The two Saiyans rushed towards each other, meeting in the middle with a punch. Taro, overpowered, slid across the floor before stopping. He held his arm, which he punched out. Not giving him any chances to recover, Broly jumped towards him. Broly's body shot towards Taro parallel to the ground. He reached Taro in an instant, aiming his palm towards Taro's chest. Taro barely blocked it with his other arm, but Broly wasn't done. Broly closed his palm, grasping onto the arm which blocked him. He rotated his body, still with the arm in a tight grasp, before throwing Taro over his shoulder to the ground. Bang! A crater was created on impact. Gasp! The air inside Taro's lung escaped him as he made contact with the ground. He had difficulties breathing, but it was not long before he was lifted up again. He was thrown towards the outside ring. Barely conscious after one exchange, he still wanted to continue. He tried to stop but couldn't. In a last attempt, he stabbed the ground with his fingers, piercing into it, ripping the ground open as he still headed towards defeat, only stopping right at the edge. But he couldn't relish his success as he heard a voice just beside him. Persistent. I like it, Broly said as he looked at the half-kneeling Taro before sending him out with a kick. Ending this round and coming out victoriously in a dominant manner is Broly. Now, we are going to select the one who will have a free win, directly going into the finals. For the next round, these battles were drawn. 1. Broly the Saiyan versus Blitz the Wolfman. 2. Zinjo the Myrmidon versus Atrog the Troll. Aaliyah was getting the free win and becoming a finalist. After a short break of healing, the next round started. Fight! Broly looked at the Wolfman in front of him, waiting for the fight to start. As soon as the signal was given, Blitz disappeared, reappearing on the right side of Broly, before disappearing again and emerging on the other side, creating afterimages with his speed alone as he circled around Broly. Blitz knew he couldn't just attack this opponent of his. The Saiyan is far stronger than the others he fought before. He had to be cautious not to get caught by him. Broly just stood there, seemingly undisturbed by the speed of his opponent. A whole minute passed with just Blitz circling around him, until Blitz couldn't take it anymore, dashing towards the still-standing Saiyan. With incredible speed, he shot out his punch towards Broly's face, who was apparently not even noticing the incoming blow. Seeing this, Blitz became happy. Even if his strength is incredible against my speed, it becomes utterly meaningless. As he made contact with Broly's face, Blitz's expression turned for the worse. He sped past Broly and came to a stop a few meters away. Blitz was showing a pained expression, contorting his entire face. He kneeled down to the ground before tilting sideward. He was holding his one hand he punched out with. It was bent in a weird way. Numerous bones from his palms and fingers were broken the instant he hit Broly. It was like his hand met a steel wall. It completely shattered his hand. Broly went ahead, picked the still whining Blitz up by the head before throwing him out of the ring. Narrator: Broly and Aaliyah made it to the finals, but who will be their opponent? Atrog or Zinjo? Find out in the next chapter of Broly the Scion of Legend 3. Chapter 22, Zinjo vs. Atrog. Without delay, the next battle was issued. Zinjo vs. Atrog. Fight! After the signal sounded out, Atrog dashed out, gaining momentum as he sped up. Zinjo didn't move from the spot, but lowered his body a bit, taking a wide stance. Atrog, arriving in front of Zinjo, punched out. Zinjo, already in his steadfast stance, received Atrog's fist with a palm. Zinjo took a few steps backwards, trying to stop the troll, as Atrog kept pooching. Atrog saw his punch being caught, with a bit surprise in his eyes, but still pushed on. The trolls take pride in their physical strength after all, but after a few meters they came to a standstill. A surprising feat. After all, he can accelerate and is in general even faster and stronger than his fellow trolls. Seeing that they stopped moving, Atrog punched with his other arm, which was caught as well. Atrog suddenly pulled Zinjo towards him, opening his mouth in an attempt to bite him. An untypically beastly move for Atrog, as he usually gives off a more collective and calmer demeanor, but a very typical move for the beastly trolls. The bite of a troll was not once seen in this tournament, but most knew of its destructiveness. They have very strong jaws, which overlaps with their eating behavior, as they eat anything of the corpse of their prey. It is mostly for eating, but they also use it as a weapon. The reason why they didn't use it beforehand was that trolls go in a bit of a frenzy when they taste blood. If that happened, they couldn't be sure that they didn't kill their opponent. Understandably, after he saw the bite approach him, Zinjo was a bit flustered. He used his other two free arms, trying to push him away from the troll. Atrog saw this and closed his mouth before taking a step back. With Atrog's pull and Zinjo's push, Zinjo lost balance and slightly fell forward. Atrog let go of Zinjo and interlocked his fingers of both hands, rose them above his hand before striking towards Zinjo's head. Zinjo knew he couldn't evade this, so he quickly tried to block it with his forearms. However, the blow was too heavy for Zinjo, breaking through his defense and landing on top of his head. His defense did take some force out of it, but he was still dizzy because of it. Of course, Atrog wouldn't let him recover. He followed up with a kick towards the Myrmidon on the ground, sending him flying across the stage. In the air, Zinjo reoriented himself before landing on his feet again. He held his side where he was kicked at a moment ago, and a small drop of blood ran down from his head over his cheek to the ground. They stared at each other before the troll began to speak. "Shouldn't you transform already? You will lose against Atrog this way." His voice was rough, very low, and it sounded like he growled at Zinjo the whole time. "Oh, sorry, but it's reserved for the Saiyan Broly." "For him? Himph. Only if you can make it to the finals." Without saying anything further, they started clashing again. Both close combat orientated and both incredible strong, clashing against each other dozens of times, destroying the stage in the process. Zinjo tried to tilt the balance of this fight with a few ki blasts, but Atrog met them with his own ki blasts. Atrog is truly a prodigy amongst the trolls for his ki control. Most trolls focus on training their physical strength as to compensate their lack of talent in matters of ki. Therefore, making strong close combat fighters amongst them, but on a mid to long range, their weakness would be obvious. Atrog, however, was very talented in ki control, relatively seen to his fellow trolls. but it still couldn't close the gap. Both were extremely close in terms of power level, but the exchanges on mid to long range was tilting the battle towards Zinjo. Still, Zinjo couldn't seal the deal as trolls had a high regeneration. After a few minutes of intense fight, Zinjo jumped back, creating great distance between them. Atrog, I have to say you are a tough one, but I have to end this now. Aiwa. Bringing his 4 arms in front of him, facing towards Atrog. Red spheres appeared in each of them, charged them up for 2 seconds while Atrog was madly sprinting towards him. He knew he couldn't let Zinjo do as he pleased, or it would be his defeat. But it was too late. Zinjo shot out his spheres consecutively as they were creating light beams behind them. Atrog redirected his charge, trying to evade them. But they weren't flying in a straight line, but slightly correcting their paths midair. He evaded 2, but the other 2 hit their target, sending him through the air outside the ring. Having lost Atrog, downheartedly went to his fellow trolls as they welcomed him excitedly. Surprisingly, after seeing his fight, the other younglings had reverent gazes as they looked at him. Although he lost, he showed them what trolls with key blasts were truly capable of, and it ignited a spark in the others to do the same. A spectacular fight between the young prodigies. Now we finally have determined the 3 finalists who will battle in a 1-on-1 against each other for the place of the number 1, becoming the champion of this tournament. The first battle will be Broly versus Aaliyah. The following battle will be the one who lost between the 2 of you against Zinjo, and ending this tournament will be the winner versus Zinjo. Let the fight begin. They walked towards the middle of the stage before they stood 10 meters apart from each other. Aaliyah started to smile as she started talking. I am not going easy on you and neither should you. Ha ha ha. Funny. Taro said the same thing. Maybe you guys should take other last words before your defeat. Don't worry, it won't be. At least I have prepared something for the tournament, unlike that idiot. Hee. Chapter 23. Aaliyah versus Broly. Aaliyah dashed towards Broly as he stood on the spot with a shoulder-wide stance. Just as Aaliyah arrived in front of him, she disappeared only to reappear behind him. She kicked towards the back of the head of Broly. He leaned forward, dodging her kick. He jumped backwards towards her, trying to slam her with his back, but she twisted her body, barely evading the impact. Broly, after passing her, he stopped before dashing towards her, sending a punch to her face. Aaliyah dodged this easily by ducking, but barely after she successfully dodged, a knee came flying, aiming at her face. Not enough time to evade. She crossed her arms, blocking the knee strike. Sliding a distance away, her arm became tingly from the impact. TCH, you really hit hard. Aaliyah was rubbing her arm and positioned herself in a wide stance. One arm outstretched while the other near her waist, forming a fist. She was showing no intention in moving. Hee. Thanks for the compliment. As soon as he said that, he turned into a blur as he rushed towards Aaliyah. Unlike Aaliyah, he didn't attack from the back, but just straight out punched her, trying to use his strength to overwhelm her. She smiled as she redirected the punch with her outstretched arm. Her fist shot out after Broly showed an opening after being redirected, landing square on his face, stopping him in his track. Naive. He quickly straightened his body and grabbed towards her wrist in the process. Aaliyah saw this, instantly kicking the grabbing hand away. She stomped her feet on the ground, creating distance between the 2. Although her hits landed, it seemed it had hardly any effect on him, she figured as he saw him smiling and slightly shaking his hand. He jumped a few tens of meters into the air before crashing towards her. This time he chopped down with his arm. She sidestepped the attack, seeing Broly's arm completely wrecking the ground. Before she could counterattack, she saw him rotate his body, still with his arm in the ground, as if he was about to throw something. Oh no. Hiya. Realizing what was about to come, she quickly formed a sphere around her body. Bang! Dozens of stone fragments crashed into her sphere. Shortly after, the created smokescreen was shortly dispersed as a green sphere flew through it, heading straight at her. She had no time to react. The sphere picked Aaliyah off into the air. Boom! A green explosion filled the sky. A small figure could be seen leaving the explosion, falling to the ground. Her figure was leaving behind a trail of black smoke as she crash-landed on the stage. Her clothes were now filled with holes. Blood was leaking out of her mouth, flowing down her chin. She struggled to get up, looking for Broly. Unexpectedly, he still stood at the place where he shot out the stones, waiting for her. Didn't you say you had something for me? If we continue like this, you will fall unconscious. Come on, show me what you've got. Stunned for a second, she smiled before straightening her body, taking a wide stance, stretching her left arm out to the sky and holding it at the wrist with the other. A blue key sphere started growing above her left hand, growing until it had a diameter of 10 meters. You asked me for this. Don't blame me if you die. Pooh. Crushing sphere. She screamed as she took a step forward, bringing her arm down, pointing her palm at Broly. The sphere followed the movement, heading to Broly. Broly didn't seem flustered. To the contrary, his face was filled with excitement. Facing the rather slow-moving sphere, he took in a wide stance, stretching his arms towards the sphere. Ugh. Heavy. Broly was being pushed backwards, his legs already deep in the ground. The Saiyans were on the edge of the seat, as were the city lord. This key sphere was no joke, potentially able to kill Broly. They obviously didn't want to lose someone promising as Broly. They were already prepared to step in at any notice. But instead of being buried into the ground with the key sphere, with every meter the sphere lost in momentum, before stopping altogether, Aaliyah tried to push the sphere further but she couldn't, it was stuck in place. You're off. Suddenly the sphere shot towards the sky with a faster speed than Aaliyah shot it out with, before exploding, igniting the sky. The shockwave almost carried off the weaker ones. It blasted all the dust away, evident of the power contained in this sphere. A figure with a leg outstretched towards the sky could be seen in the crater the sphere was in just a moment ago. Broly slowly put down his leg before he started to walk towards the shocked Aaliyah. It wasn't only Aaliyah who was shocked. This sphere was Aaliyah's trump card. One couldn't only look at the speed it moved with. It contained a terrifying amount of power inside. It was not easily moved, but Broly kicked it away. Zinjo's expression turned somewhat solemn as he saw that, but he was still confident in his transformation. With it he would even exceed Broly's power, he firmly believed. Ha ha ha, that was great. Really a frightening technique? Was that the result of your extra solo training in the last 2 months? Really scary. No wonder you are hailed as the #1 prodigy of the Saiyans. Well, obviously not anymore. Hee. True. Hurry up and send me another one. Really refreshing to hold up against something like that. Another one? You gotta be kidding me. Nope, I'm spent. I can barely even stand now. I give up. You're a Saiyan. We don't give up. What's so you can thrash me? I am not even able to defend myself. I would be a punching bag. Beside, I need to recover for the next fight. Maybe I have a shot for second place. While the announcer babbled about the fight and conclusion, Broly and Aaliyah headed towards the resting area before sitting down next to each other. They focused on healing and recovering until Aaliyah spoke out. Zinjo is strong. I don't have much hope against him if he transforms. Since he only wants to fight you with it, I may have a shot in winning. Indeed. In his base form, he's as strong as Taro. Around 1.5 million, I would say. With his transformation, he will be even stronger than you. Are you confident in winning? Let's just say I didn't come unprepared. Chapter 24, Zinjo. An hour later, Aaliyah went up the stage again for her next and last battle for today. Against Zinjo, the strongest from the Myrmidon. Throughout the tournament, he won each battle in his base form. Fight! They charged at each other from the get-go. Aaliyah started shooting key spheres as she was running, but Zinjo slapped them away, exploding in the distance with blue key scattering around. As soon as she came into grabbing range, Zinjo started barraging Aaliyah with punches, easily receiving and blocking the attacks. Aaliyah suddenly tried to sweep Zinjo's legs with a kick, but he dodged it by jumping up. She quickly followed with another kick with her other leg towards Zinjo's stomach. Zinjo blocked the incoming attack and flew a few meters because of the kick, before landing on his feet again. With no hesitation, they started clashing with each other again. Aaliyah, very agile, easily dodging most of the attacks, and her ability to redirect attack was impressive as well. Zinjo, on the other hand, was strong. His forearms were making up for the speed difference between the two. Both were getting exhausted after a few minutes of intense battle. They exchanged hundreds of times, before Aaliyah created distance, holding her arm up to charge up her crushing sphere until it was 5 meters big, half the size of the one she fired towards Broly. Zinjo squinted his eyes as he saw this. He started sprinting towards her while shooting some ki blast at her, but it was already too late. His ki blast collided with the crushing sphere, doing near to none damage. The sphere continued advancing. This sphere was smaller than the one against Broly, but it was also faster, speeding towards Zinjo. Instead of trying to dodge, he headed straight at it. Just a couple of meters in front of it, he stopped before he released 3 beams from his arms towards the sphere, pushing it slightly upwards, just enough so Aaliyah started appearing in his vision. With his free arm, he shot out another beam heading straight at her. After shooting her crushing sphere, she saw Zinjo heading towards it. But similar to her fight with Broly, the sphere suddenly stopped moving after Zinjo disappeared from her view. She was still struggling to push her sphere forward, but as soon as she saw her sphere lift a bit, she was dazed for a second. A beam was heading towards her. She could only abandon her sphere to dodge the beam. The sphere, losing the influence of Aaliyah, started accelerating as the beams were pushing it into the sky. Sigh. Seems like I really have to work on this attack. Too draining and too slow. Although Aaliyah had a higher power level than Zinjo in his base form, but his endurance was far higher than hers. Her loss was certain after she missed her chance to win the battle with her trump card. She struggled for the rest of the time limit, but to no avail. Zinjo completely dominated her throughout the rest of the fight. Dejectedly that she only placed third, she passed Broly, screaming, "Don't you dare lose." Before running straight towards the girls' changing room, Broly noticed that her voice was shaking a bit as she screamed at him. After an hour-long break, the last battle for this day, and with it the last for this tournament, began. Broly and Zinjo now on stage to decide who will become the champion. So, you will finally show your last form? Of course. I waited so long just to surprise you and catch you off guard. Didn't want you to think of any countermeasures. You are getting my hopes up. Don't disappoint me. Humph. You will regret your words. Fight. As soon as the battle started, Zinjo started screaming. His body began to glow in an orange hue. His arms were fusing, and his skin took an orange tint. Instead of two normal arms, one of his arms was shaped like a blade. A 100 centimeters long blade formed as his underarm, while his other arm remained mostly normal, but there were changes as well. His hands with a metallic sheen developed sharp 10 centimeters long black claws. Without waiting, Zinjo stomped the ground, shooting like a cannon towards Broly, who was still observing him. Zinjo instantly appeared in front of Broly. Broly was shocked at the sheer speed of Zinjo, not one bit slower than Blitz the Wolfman. Before Broly could think any further, Zinjo slashed Broly with his blade-like arm, aiming for Broly's head, who tilted his just enough to get out of harm's way. Broly quickly jumped backwards, landing a couple tens of meters away. Of course, Zinjo wouldn't have killed him, or rather he knew that something like this couldn't kill someone like Broly. But still, Zinjo expected to see fear in Broly's eyes at the potent to be beheaded. But he could only see undisguised excitement and expectations in them. With the smile on his face, it seemed like Broly just found the perfect toy, not wanting to wait to play with it. Saiyans. Pfui. What did I expect? You are just a bunch of battle-loving maniacs. Oh, thank you. It wasn't a compliment. Stop with this nonsense. Prepare to be cut. Zinjo started dashing towards Broly again, while dragging his blade arm behind him. Now that's the spirit. Broly rushed at Zinjo as well, clashing in the middle of the stage with each other. Broly dodged all the slashes of the blade arm and blocked off the claws. Zinjo doubled in speed and strength after the transformation. In fact, Zinjo already surpassed Broly in raw strength and speed, which showed itself in the beginning of the battle. Broly was sustaining more and more wounds as the fight was going on, but even though he accumulated more wounds, he got increasingly less hit than before. His dodges became more precise, dodging only with a hair-wide distance. Guiding and blocking the claw strikes looked more effortless as the battle went on. Most of the audience were holding their breath as they saw this high-speed fight. Those kids were already stronger than a lot of the adult fighters among them. It was simply unbelievable for them. A 3- and 8-year-old able to beat the living sh*t out of them. Chapter 25. The Final Battle. While the audience was still in shock, the two on stage distanced themselves from each other. Broly's eyes were filled with excitement as he looked towards his opponent. Broly already had numerous cuts all over his body, but none of them lethal or near as serious as they looked. During the time they fought each other, Broly used his body to endure the superficial wounds, but always dodged the dangerous ones. His perception was heightened to an extreme degree, so much that he corrected his own movements whilst fighting against an opponent who was not only faster but also stronger than him. Every attack of Zinjo could potentially finish this match, declaring Zinjo as the victor. But as more wounds Broly sustained, rather than slowing down and losing in strength, his movements became sharper than ever before. Beside that, Broly's endurance was higher than Zinjo's, and it was evident to all. While Broly looked awful as he was covered in his own blood and sweat, his breathing was long and steady. Zinjo, on the other, took short and erratic breaths, looking exhausted already. Of course, the wounds on Broly were still something he had to deal with. Even if he can sustain countless wounds, everyone had their upper limit. As long as Zinjo could push him that far or dealt a crucial hit, Zinjo would win. Without thinking any further, Zinjo dashed at Broly again, aiming all his attacks on vital areas, pushing and pressuring further until Broly would break. After Zinjo missed a hit once again, a fist landed on his stomach, lifting his body into the air. He landed and took a few steps backwards while holding his stomach, breathless. His eyes were widened from the pain. He looked to the front as he saw the smiling Saiyan. You're running out of time, Myrmidon. I'm still waiting for you to crush me. Broly's first attack in this battle, and it already almost forced Zinjo to his knees. Zinjo couldn't believe this. He already transformed and wounded Broly numerous times. How is it possible that Broly could still go on? He should have won with ease already, so why? Zinjo already lost a bit confidence as he saw the steady figure in front of him. He didn't notice that Broly used his compelling speech, which he copied from the succubus, to influence the mood of Zinjo. Fear can be a powerful weapon. The emotions heightens alertness, keeping the body and brain focused and allow the person to stay their ground and fight or to run away as quick as possible. But many also freeze up, a primal instinct, mostly for the predator to be less likely to see it. Now Broly became the predator in Zinjo's eyes, and instead of readying for battle, he froze up. Broly of course saw this and rushed towards Zinjo and struck his chest. Zinjo flew with his back to the ground across the stage. He tried to get back his bearings, but before he could, Broly already jumped on his stomach, crashing Zinjo into the ground. Broly stood on the body of Zinjo before jumping up and accelerating downwards, again pushing Zinjo deeper into the ground. He started using Zinjo's body as a trampoline, largening the crater under Zinjo with every hit. After a while, Zinjo escaped the repeated attack before facing Broly again, this time filled with battle intent. Hee, that's more like it, Broly exclaimed as he started running towards Zinjo, initiating another round of devastating exchanges. Thunder-like explosions rang out on the stage, the complete stage filled with dust and shrapnel. It was thoroughly destroyed by the two. After a while, two exhausted figures were standing still in the middle. They already battled for half an hour. The time limit was lifted as it would be the last fight. Fortunate for Broly as his endurance surpassed Zinjo. Both were now exhausted to the extreme. Zinjo was already pushed past his limits, his legs shaking from exhaustion. He couldn't go on with this kind of battle, he had to win this in one last strike. Broly was thinking the same way. Although he had stamina to spare, his body was riddled with wounds. Most of the blood on the stage was from Broly. The loss of blood was ultimately affecting his mind. Already on the verge of losing his conscience, he charged all his remaining strength into the technique he prepared for this tournament. The technique from the original Broly. A highly compressed energy sphere, the eraser cannon. Zinjo started to charge up his energy. His blade arm pointed to the sky began to shine brighter the second. On the other side of the stage, Broly powered up his energy, leaking it out to the surrounding, filling his close periphery with a green light. Afterwards, he gathered the green light energy from around his body into his palm, shining through his fingers before being formed into a bright green energy sphere. On the same time, Zinjo slashed down, sending out an orange sharp wave of ki. Broly threw his sphere in response. Fire-splitting blade. Eraser cannon. In an instant, the two ki attacks met in the middle of the stage. A 1-meter-tall sphere clashed against a 3-meter-long ki wave. Although it looked unimposing in comparison to other ki attacks, the moment the attacks met, the terrifying energy created a dangerous shockwave. The collision gave birth to powerful whirlwinds as lightning permeated throughout the stage. The stray energy strong enough to kill the majority of the people present. The other younglings were already brought away from harm's way. The audience started to fly into the air as they watched in shock from a distance, as the whole stadium was tinted in a green hue on one side and an orange one on the other. The two lights shone into the already dark sky. Broly's sphere was being slowly pushed away at the beginning. It even began to show signs of being cut into two in the area the attacks collided. Broly and Zinjo still pushing all they had into the attacks, pulling out their energy to the utmost limit. Crack. Suddenly the blade began to crack, followed by an explosion. Zinjo was drained of energy with no strength left. He fell to the ground. The explosion was swept away as the sphere shot towards the lying Zinjo, creating a path of destruction. Just before the sphere landed on the unconscious Zinjo, it got diverted by another sphere into the sky, exploding far away from the stadium, dominating the sky. The green energy shone onto the planet like the midday sun,